it's weird. For 2 straight days, we've had late night, not really late night, like very early, wee hours in the morning, at least if you're on the East Coast, news coming out of a major American professional league. So Harden was traded at like 2 in the morning Eastern time, and Josh McDaniels was fired by the Las Vegas Raiders around 1 a.m. Eastern time, obviously 10 p.m. in Vegas. Man's out here trick-or-treating with his kids probably, and they fired him. That's just, but it's a harsh league in the NFL, and what Josh McDaniel did as head coach of the Raiders is pretty harsh as well. If you go back also to his days as the head coach of the Denver Broncos, which was, albeit brief, but remarkably unsuccessful, he's 14-33. And I said this the day when the Raiders, they had something, man. It felt like about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, something like that. It felt like they had momentum as a franchise. It felt like they were in a spot where, okay, we just made the playoffs. We had the season from hell, so to speak, in terms of off-field stuff. Gruden, the controversy there. We had somebody on our team tragically kill somebody. We had somebody else get in trouble and get cut from a team for acting like a doofus. Another player on our team got arrested for DUI. Like, it was just, everything seemed to be just falling to shreds, falling to pieces for the Raiders. And Derek Carr, my man, I'm still a Derek Carr guy. Okay, I'm not going to sell my stock until proven otherwise. But Derek Carr righted the ship, somehow got this Raiders team to the playoffs, and they lost by the skin of their teeth to the Cincinnati Bengals, who ended up making the Super Bowl. So if you're Vegas, you're like, everything kind of possibly went wrong, and we nearly beat the team that made the Super Bowl on the road. So we're in a good spot as a franchise. And then the first domino falls. And this sort of leads to my overarching points. Because, of course, the Raiders made the right decision to fire McDaniels. Yes, of course they did. He's been awful. As a head coach in Denver, as a head coach in Vegas, of course they made the right decision. But they had an opportunity. Rich Bisaccia, special teams coach. I know we don't look at special teams coaches in the same ilk as like an offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator. I understand that. They are very important. But by the way, he was a special teams coach with the Philadelphia Eagles and is now a dang good head coach in the NFL today, John Harbaugh. I think the Ravens are pretty happy to have him. Rich Bisaccia takes over this thing decades long as an NFL coach, special teams guy, gets his opportunity as the interim, helps this team. Is certainly a reason that they got to the playoffs. He was the coach after all. And they move on from him. And I'm like, okay, I don't like this. I don't like what the Raiders are doing. And not only do they move on from him, they move on in favor of the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. And again, let this be sort of a side note. Let this be a cautionary tale to those who are looking for a new head coach and go with the guy who is an OC with a historically great quarterback. I'm not saying you shouldn't make the move. Again, Eric Bieniemy in Washington out. Obviously, Sam Howell's not a historically great quarterback, but Mahomes was. If that's the reason you don't hire Bieniemy, that's the only reason I wouldn't understand why you wouldn't do it. Otherwise, I think he's a good leader, he's smart, clever. Like, I think you should hire him otherwise in terms of that. But Adam Gase, remember Adam Gase? He was the offensive coordinator with the Broncos, was highly recommended by Peyton Manning. Yeah, he was awful. He was a terrible head coach in Miami, and it was even worse with the Jets. Nathaniel Hackett. Oh, Aaron Rodgers. Listen, Aaron Rodgers speak very highly of Nathaniel Hackett. It turns out he just liked playing darts with him in the quarterback's room. Hackett was awful in Denver. And now Josh McDaniels, offensive coordinator in New England with Brady. And it's like, oh, this young, bright OC is helping Tommy and helping Tommy become one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Yeah, he went to Denver. Tommy was still great, still won MVPs, and Denver was awful and had their own Spygate scandal. Josh McDaniels comes back to the Patriots. Patriots office didn't miss a beat. Why? Because Tom was there. And then he leaves. By the way, lied to the Colts a few years before that. That's neither here nor there. Leaves, goes to the Raiders after Mac Jones's rookie year. New England's still bad. Vegas is bad. McDaniels gets fired. The Patriots are still bad. The Raiders are in a pretty cruddy spot themselves. Tom was the orchestrator, or it was the conductor, so to speak, of all the Patriots' success. We obviously know that to be true today. But if I'm a Raiders fan, for the record, we actually have a Raiders fan here at this network. My guy Darian has got a Raiders show. The Raiders Roundup, I think, is what it's called. Fellow Vols fan as well. So, but to him, to other Raiders fans out there, I would be happy McDaniels is gone, but still kind of pessimistic. because of Mark Davis. From the end of his late dad, Al Davis's tenure, to now Mark Davis, we know he's not just, listen, the only bad thing about Mark Davis is not just his hairstyle and his barber. And man, that rich can't get a barber to save his life. It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. Okay, I mean, there's a local guy across the street in Vegas, surely to goodness, who can fix that, but that's beside the point. Mark Davis, again, at the end of his dad, Al Davis's life and 10 years the Raiders owner, this has kind of been how it's operated in Las Vegas, Nevada, or even in Oakland, California when the Raiders were there. Dysfunctional, can't draft, trying to copy the Patriots, trying to bring in Josh McDaniels, bringing in former Patriots, Patriot rejects, so to speak, who were almost all, certainly the opposite side of the ball, products of Tom Brady. And now at this point, you have a pissed-off wide receiver in Davante Adams, a benched quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo, and an awful defense once again. I mean, why should I all of a sudden look at the Las Vegas Raiders and say, you know what? Okay, they got rid of a bad coach. Good for them. They're going to hire the right guy. Why the heck should I believe that? For the record, there are going to be at least 2 jobs that are going to be very attractable. Very attractable. Attractive is probably the better word to use for that. But more attractive. The Los Angeles Chargers, who Sean Payton should have. Of course, Terry Bradshaw. I heard Terry Bradshaw the other day, and this is just his word. He's not an insider, he's not a reporter, but he knows Sean Payton. And Terry Bradshaw, the Hall of Fame quarterback, obviously, on Fox last week said something like Sean Payton wanted to go to the Chargers, but they didn't want to pay him, which, if that's true, that doesn't surprise me because the ownership in LA is notoriously cheap. So that doesn't surprise me in the least. They refused to build a new stadium in San Diego. Otherwise, they'd still be the San Diego Chargers. But a head coaching job where that's available and Justin Herbert is your quarterback, I mean, doesn't get much more attractive than that. With that roster, with those defensive linemen, Mack and Bosa and those linebackers of the secondary, offensively, you got Keenan Allen, you got Mike Williams, you got Quentin Johnson, you got potentially Austin Eckler if he stays. You've got a great offensive line. You got all the pieces, just the coaching there. Head coach and OC in particular, as I've ranted and raved about numerous times during the year, is a complete liability and is holding this team back from doing anything. Get the right coach, all of a sudden it changes things. That's an attractive job. What about the Chicago Bears? Matt Eberflus is probably a nice guy. He seemed to be a decent defensive coordinator. I think he was in Indy before he went to Chicago. It doesn't work. Again, you can tell we've seen coaches in the past take on awful situations. Look at Brian Flores in Miami. And Brian Flores ended up not being the long-term answer to the degree that Mike McDaniel is. But Brian Flores will get an opportunity. I certainly hope that's the case as a head coach because he took over a crap show in Miami and had him on the brink of the playoffs twice. When it wasn't a very good roster. This isn't today's Dolphins. This is 2 years ago. Tua hadn't got it yet. There was no Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle wasn't there one of those years, and they nearly got to the playoffs 2 years in a row. We can tell good coaching Matt Eberflus is not the guy. Not to mention the Bears could have the first 2 picks of the draft potentially, because they have Carolina's pick. Both of those, just those 2 alone, are easily more attractive jobs than the Raiders. Sure, they may draft a quarterback, but when's the last time the Raiders have gotten the whole quarterback thing right? Derek Carr was there, and as much as I love Derek Carr, Derek Carr was never going to be the guy to take this organization to the top because, frankly, I'm not sure Patrick Mahomes could or Joe Burrow could. It's a poorly run organization. That's the whole reason McDaniels is there. I mean, what franchise has an interim head coach, steps in, does a really good job, actually was better than his predecessor, the guy who was fired before him and is the reason he had the job to begin with, helps get a team to the playoffs with all the turmoil, and you move on from him for a previously failed head coach? I'm missing something. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.